Hello Internet, Taliesin here, and today we are talking meters. And when I say meters, obviously I'm not talking about the unit of size best used for measuring Chris Novoselic's arms. And anyway, that's stupid because you can't measure Chris Novoselic's arms because they're just too long. You have to measure the space around Chris Novoselic's arms and make your calculations from there. But no, we are talking damage meters in World of Warcraft Legion, and specifically how happy your melee DPS is going to be with those meters in the Tomb of Sargeras in patch 7.2.5. Because 7.2.5 is another major tuning patch in Legion, as Blizzard juggle numbers, change abilities, and generally try to piss off as many feral players as possible in the build up to the new raid. And no matter what melee spec you play, there are changes you need to know about. It's not all standing around in the big red circle ignoring mechanics and hitting macros, you know? I mean, okay, it is those things too, but you still need to be on top of these changes. And of course, Blizzard is sure to be tweaking and modifying those figures like it was a Starbucks tax return right up to the last second. So while the exact numbers and percentages featured in this video may alter slightly over the course of the patch, it's safe to assume that all of the meaningful changes are now in place, which means we can now look at who's happy, who's disappointed, who are the winners and losers in melee DPS in World of Warcraft Legion patch 7.2.5. Okay, go. Death Knights will have very different opinions on the amount of work their class needed in 7.2.5 depending on which side of the spec divide they fall. If you are a Frost player, then frankly, you've probably been hoping that 7.2.5 would never happen, because the last thing you want is anything changing while you are sitting pretty towards the top of the pile. It would be like La La Land asking Warren Beatty if he's absolutely certain that he read that card right. And that was so nearly the case before Blizzard dropped a Howling Blast nerf through changes to blast radius, but in reality, it's not that big a deal. The initial numbers work out at about 3 to 5% nerf to your overall raid damage, which is never fun, but honestly, this spec can take it. Frost DK is still badass. Yes, you're still basing everything around elongated uses of Breath of Sindragosa, and there are players that would have been hoping that some of the underpowered talents around it could have been buffed to make things a bit more interesting. That doesn't look like it's going to happen this patch at least, so you're just going to have to live with having a really fun procky spec that does wicked damage and a pretty nifty tier 20 set bonus that turbocharges your Pillar of Frost to boot. Hopefully you can live with that. I hope that's okay. Now, the big DK changes though are coming to Unholy, who have spent 7.2 enjoying a really cool and pretty unique playstyle, but finding themselves propping up the tables like a folded up beer mat. It's Death Coil which is getting most of the attention, receiving a substantial rise in both damage and runic power costs. So though it's going to be a buff and a nerf, it should be good news for Unholy, who really need that ability to feel more impactful. And especially with all that mastery you've been stacking, you have been stacking mastery, right? Death Coil is going to be big for Unholy in 7.2.5, especially as tier 20 bonuses are all about the ghouls. Another area where Unholy are going to be noticing a marked improvement is their cleave damage. Their new legendary ring, Soul of the Death Lord, gives them the Bursting Sores talent, which combined with Ebon Fever on that row is actually pretty awesome. And unlike a lot of new rings, it's probably going to be a top Lego for you. You should be able to get some filthy cleave out of that. Oh no, wait, sorry. You should be able to get some unholy cleave out of that. There have been promises from Blizzard about changes to Necrotic Strike too, although nothing's happened at the time of publishing. But either way, we should be looking at two relatively happy Death Knight specs in 7.2.5, even if they are happy for quite different reasons. Feral Druid players find themselves in a bit of a strange position in Legion at the moment. Players at the very top seem pretty happy with the spec and say it's in a good place, whereas everyone else is in total fucking despair, feeling like this is a spec so neglected Blizzard would rather put it in a carrier bag and drown it in the canal with all the other unwanted pets. Yes, it's fair to say that these 6 people that still play Feral Druid are pretty divided. Basically, it takes a lot of effort to get some pretty average damage out of cats right now, and the 7.2.5 changes look to shorten that gap between those at the high end and the dirty casuals. So Ferocious Bite is getting a big buff, which is good because that name was starting to feel a bit ironic, to be honest. And this is extra welcome because it suddenly makes Sabretooth a decent talent choice if you hate Jagged Wounds. And let's face it, you hate Jagged Wounds. Soul of the Forest is getting a surprisingly sensible redesign. It returns less energy than before, but gives you 10% damage increase to your finishing moves. And Soul of the Forest is the talent that the Feral Legendary Ring gives you too, which means you can combine it with Savage Roar, which is when stuff gets really really interesting, as empowering your finishing move so much has pretty great synergy with the T20 set, which is all about rip. All of this is going to combine to make your rotation a whole lot easier. Less spinning plates and more picking plates up and chucking them at baddies, which is how it should be. For demon hunters, of course, DPS is not the issue. They've got DPS coming out of their ears, well, their eyes. So for them, a win would be no nerfs and seriously any reason to not have to take official most boring talent ever made, Demon Blades. Well, good news, because Prepared is getting a buff. More rage over a longer duration won't replace Demon Blades at the absolute cutting edge, but it is a genuine option and is viable. And just think, a vengeful retreat every 15 seconds, so you can get back to jumping all over the room into fire again, which is why you play Havoc in the first place, and we all know it. And if you absolutely must take the Tim Henman of the talent tree Demon Blades, then it now does less damage and rage, but procs 100% of the time. So either way, rage generation is going to be smoother and easier to plan. And of course, if you have Anger of the Half Giants, then you really must take Demon Blades, as getting that extra fury on every hit will be just too good to pass up, even though it is as interesting as watching Iron Fist at half speed, sorry. Also, rather interestingly, Chaos Blades will no longer stack with your mastery, which means that there might also be a change in stat priority for Havoc, with haste being something you want to pay a bit more attention to. If feral druids think they've been neglected, then spare a thought for the Survival Hunter, a spec which is the definition of middle of the road, and so under the radar that, come on, admit it, you'd forgotten they were even going to be on this list until I just mentioned them. And in fact, you're even starting to lose interest now, but stay with me, because no, Survival hasn't had a single change in 7.2.5 so far. No, stay with me. There's a certain weird, grim determination with Survival Hunters about how much work they have to do for some seriously underwhelming return, which is maybe a bit masochistic when you think about it, but you know what, let's not think about it, because that's great, that's good for them. I guess the tier 20 set has interplay between Mongoose Bite and Lacerate, so there might be a slight change in your rotation to reflect Lacerate uptime in single target fights, but I am really scraping the barrel here, guys, because that is it. That's all I've got. So, I won't keep you survival players. I'll leave you to get back to whatever it is you do, building up those Mongoose stacks. Yeah, gotta build up those mongoose stacks so you can spend those mongoose stacks. I know how it works. Okay, sit down, children, and let me tell you a little story. Once upon a time, there was a class called Windwalker Monk, and they were great at AoE. In fact, they were so good at AoE that their most powerful single target attack was an AoE ability, Fists of Fury. One day, a mean old ogre called Blizzard decided that Fists of Fury was an ability that you should have to think about more than that, and deigned it would be much funner if you would rather hold off fists specifically for AoE situations. So they nerfed its damage by 20%. The monks were really happy about this change to their gameplay and damage throughput, and thanked Blizzard for their wise development and no, it was a shit show, obviously. Who knew Blizzard was a subsidiary of United Airlines? What is this? Do you idiots even play the game at the high-end level? If not, maybe consider hiring someone who doesn't have a similar IQ to a candy necklace. But I can see their point. Getting your main ability nerfed like that is hard, and even though a range increase that comes with it is going to be fun in full-on AoE situations and Mythic Plus, where you're still going to be great, obviously, this is still a nerf. Spinning Crane Kick is also getting nerfed, as Rushing Jade Wind now only applies the Mark of the Crane damage bonus to 2 targets as opposed to 4, and that damage bonus has been nerfed too, which is understandable by itself, but stings when you remember that, oh yeah, also your main damage ability has been nerfed by 20%. Damage on most other abilities have been upped a touch, and the rotation is still really engaging and satisfying, but try finding a Windwalker Monk who cares about that and not the 20% nerf to their main damage ability right now. Well, cheer up though, monks, because check out your legendary ring. It gives chi. Oh, forget I said anything, sorry. Now, of course, what all Retribution Paladins want is for Crusade to become baseline, so there is any choice at all in the level 100 talents, but that clearly is not going to happen anytime soon, so Rets are going to have to settle for a buff to Blessing of Ashbringer, which now awards 4% strength instead of 2% strength. Is that a buff or is that a nerf? So in the short term, it's a nerf, but once you hit 50k strength, it breaks even, and from there, it's a buff. Okay, great, it's a buff. You should be hitting 50k at around eye level 920 or so. So in the long term, it is a slight buff, and if you find that boring rep paladins, well, I'm sorry, but it's literally the most interesting thing happening to your spec in the 725. You've got solid T20 bonuses that see you having more holy power to play with, and like most classes, a pretty underwhelming legendary ring. But you do have the Ashbringer, and I don't know if you've forgotten, but that does mean you're not allowed to complain about anything ever again. You're in a pretty good place in the tables, and as Blizzard say, good stories, which, you know, beats an engaging rotation any day of the week, doesn't it? And of course, all of this is in PvE. In PvP, you're still fucked because you're about as mobile as a Motorola Dynatak. There's a pretty clearly defined hierarchy between the three rogue specs at the moment, and 725 is looking to shake that up a bit with some pretty big changes to all specs. Blizzard's plan with Assassination is to try and steer players away from an automatic poison build and open up the possibility of a viable bleed build, because, you know, class fantasy or something. Agonizing Poison is gone, replaced by Toxic Blade, which deals damage, awards a combo point, and increases the critical strike chance of nature damage abilities, and increases the damage of your poisons against the target. Sanguate now causes bleed effects to deal their damage even faster. It costs 20 energy, but means that with Subterfuge, a bleed build is indeed going to be a lot more viable, helping Assassination with ad fights and multi-target fights. So Blizzard got their wish, although it's not really certain that any Assassination players shared their wish, and losing Toxic Blade is not popular with the player base. There's a very strong worry that Assassination is going to go from being top dog in 7.2 to being the weakest rogue spec in Tomb of Sargeras. Of course, being the weakest rogue spec is a bit like being the least annoying Jonas brother, it's all relative. Outlaw is another spec that Blizzard is trying to smooth out resource generation for, so Adrenaline Rush will now save you less energy, but for a longer duration, and Combat Potency will generate less energy more often, which should help you avoid being energy capped and starved a bit. And the other big change is to everyone's favourite RNG shit show, Roll the Bones. Blizzard say they want to take away some of the randomness involved in the mechanic they invented, where you literally roll a dice to randomly decide which buffs you get, so not only are they trying to bring the individual buffs more into line with each other, but on average, fewer buffs will happen. The idea is that you shouldn't always be re-rolling when you just get the one buff, and it's a noble idea, but while the energy changes are clearly great, I'm slightly unconvinced about Roll the Bones right now. Either way, it's still going to be your go-to AoE rogue spec in 7.2.5. Out of all of the rogue specs, Subtlety probably have the most to be excited about, because the worst rogue spec by miles in 7.2 is getting buffs to damage and fun, with changes across the board, but the two most important areas of focus are Shadow Dance and AoE. The burst damage of Shadow Dance is becoming more important as it loses a charge, but its duration is increased to 4 seconds, with the option of increasing the damage by another 30% with new talent Dark Shadow. So far so good. And your damage in AoE situations will be going up too. New specialization Shuriken combo makes Shuriken Storm increase your next eviscerate damage by 10%, and that stacks 5 times. And Nightblade's damage over time has been decreased heavily, but you now deal 15% extra damage to enemies infected by your Nightblade. And what on earth does that all actually mean? It means no more constant spamming of Nightblade on every target you can get your hands on. You're going to focus on one target while sending out Shuriken Storms to maintain Shuriken combo stacks and do a whole ton more damage on that one target. Utilizing an AoE situation to do more single target damage really fits the ninja class fantasy of Subtlety for me, and I really like these changes. People are predicting a huge power increase for Subtlety in Tomb, but whether that happens or not, it's certainly the most interesting rogue to play, in my opinion. I mean, come on, it walks on water for fuck's sake. I hate you. I legitimately hate you. I hate every single person who is working on Shamans right now for failing me. I have never been so disappointed in my life, and I've had my home burned down before my eyes in real life and made homeless, and this feeling is worse than when I was a goddamn bum on the street. That is how bad my spec is being designed right now. This is what happens when you fuck with a Shaman's Storm Strike, Blizz. Enhancement was one of my favourite specs to play at the launch of Legion, but there's a feeling among players now that Blizzard have tried to balance their numbers by changing a playstyle and rotation that wasn't broken in the first place, and they are worried that this trend is set to continue in 7.2.5. The idea is that changes to Stormbringer and Tempest will see the same amount of freshly buffed Storm Strikes going out, but more evenly spaced, hopefully making the gameplay less RNG based and reliant on Storm Strike, Feast or Famine. The feeling in the Shaman community is that evening out Storm Strike procs isn't going to solve the problem that they don't do enough damage in the first place, and just make the spec much less fun to play for no reason, and that is a fair concern. But I have to say that from my own experience, close on the PTR, it does seem a lot more fluid than in 7.2, and a lot better to play. Plus, out of all of the melee on this list, I think Enhancement is the most likely to see numbers changes after the patch goes live, so I'm gonna tentatively say that I'm hopeful for Enhancement. It's always gonna be flashy and procky and just look absolutely ridiculous. It's just a case of where that tuning lands. Fury Warriors continue to be one of the most balls-out, stupid fun specs in the entire game, and Blizzard have rather wisely decided to leave them the fuck alone. In fact, they've had an overall power buff, which you're never going to say no to, are you? You just keep spinning around in your magnificent circle, Fury. Don't let anyone stop you being you. Arms is changing, though, mostly in an attempt to make Colossus Smash windows less important, but more frequent. So first up, Arms Mastery is getting nerfed 20%, which means that your damage outside of Colossus Smash is closer to the damage inside it. And the cooldown of Colossus Smash has been reduced to 20 seconds to even all of that out. Even without Titanic Might, it's pretty easy to keep 100% uptime on Colossus Smash now, which means you can play around on the new look talent bar. Rend is going to do some excellent damage, and In for the Kill has been changed to give you a haste boost when you use Colossus Smash, which is smash it. Fury Warrior? He's just spinning. Focus Rage cost has doubled. This seems to be Blizzard's way of telling you that they don't want you using Focus Rage in PvE anymore, which is fair enough because Focus Rage always bored the shit out of me. This change is like getting sacked from a job you hate. But whatever, there's just not going to be enough Rage flying around for it to be a great choice, and raiding would be my guess. One ability they do want you using though is Execute, which is getting a stupid buff and is kind of the definition of playing to your strengths. It's kind of like if Jeff Goldblum was somehow even cooler, or if Chris Novoselic had even longer arms, or if this church was even more inappropriate. This should make Arms a lot more adaptable and forgiving in raids, and counts as a buff, obviously. But you know who doesn't give a shit about that? Fury. Fury gives no shit. Because Fury, just be spinning. Oh, look at him, he looks so happy, doesn't he? Let's not tell him about the Draft of Souls nerf, it'll only spoil it. Thank you for joining us today.
And thank you to everyone who contributed your opinions and footage to this video. We've credited you properly in the description.
An extra special big thank you, as always, to all our amazing patrons who give their actual real-life money to make this video happen. If you enjoyed it, don't thank us. Thank them. And I did enjoy it.
Well, then you can like it if you like.
Only joking, it was shit. I didn't enjoy it at all.
Well, then you can downvote the shit out of it. And remember, my name is Karak.
No, it's not.
Nope.
My name is Taliesin.
And I'm Evital.
And until next time, team, cheerio.